Well, looks like Wopsel's gonna give us our last review. What do you have for us today, Wopsel?
Fly me to the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Let me sail beyond the stars. Today, you guys, we are reviewing the one, the only Frank Sinatra himself, Old Blue Eyes.
Oh, my goodness. What's his nickname?
Old Blue Eyes, right? Or he's got a...
Wasn't he called like the senator or the... I don't know. I'll have to look that up.
The chairman of the board.
He was the chairman
of the
board. He was vice president of communications. He was, he was all those things. But I think, now, everybody listening to this knows about Frank Sinatra, but I wanted to bring some reviews in case people aren't like all in. They need to know. They need to know about Frank Sinatra. So what do you guys think about Frank Sinatra?
I don't really like him personally. I love the music, of course. I mean, there's no denying that he is a giant in the musical field. But he's like, personally, I don't think I would have wanted to hang out with him. So, but he's so good with, the music is so good. So I think I'm going to have to rate him. I don't know. It's so hard. That could be a
rating, couldn't it?
How about... It's so hard.
Okay,
that's my rating. Good. Thanks for saving me there.
Piggybacking off of Sherry's point, we're kind of running into this a lot in modern times. You've got R. Kelly. You got Michael Jackson. You got these people who are not exactly who I want to, go hang out with, but... does that make their music less? And as far as Michael Jackson goes, I watched the HBO documentary, and it made me full on believe that Michael Jackson did commit these crimes, and it made me not like his music for a little bit. Then I got back on board until I heard the song "Pretty Young Thing," PYT. And then all of a sudden I was back out again. So, But I don't have as much problem with, Frank Sinatra his era was so long ago when he was doing his thing and when he was at the height of his problems. When I was young, and I did not discover Frank Sinatra until my little brother, Wopsel, one day was like, I love Frank Sinatra, or Mom told me or something. And I was like, what? You do not. Stop lying now. And then something happened. I don't know what it was. It was kind of like when your taste buds change when you get older. And all of a sudden, you like broccoli, and you used to hate broccoli. The same thing happened with the chairman of the board. And I rate Frank Sinatra, I'm going to give him an A. Just an overall A.
Well, it's interesting, Tony, you talk about me falling into liking it, because let me tell you how that story went. So one day I was at one of the many houses we lived in Prague all by myself, and I was probably 10 or 11 or 12, and so I was just sitting there, and you guys were like off to college, so it was like after you guys were officially gone, and so I found a CD that we had called Frank Sinatra Gold. And I looked at that and I said, a lot of people like this. Our mother definitely likes this. And surprisingly to me, our mom always had pretty good musical taste growing up, right? And so, at least I think she did. And so I said, well, if Mom loves Frank, I guess maybe I should like Frank. And so I sat down and listened to that album a few times through. It had 12 songs on it. And I was like, this guy is really, really, really good. And all of a sudden now, I'm a Frank head, is what they call it, And so then I had to let the world know. So then Mom came home and I was like, Mom, I listened to this Frank album. He's awesome. And so, it just kind of spread from there. So just kind of on a whim, I decided I want to see if this guy's good. And he kind of is. So let's talk about his music first, because I feel like that's kind of where we're tracking maybe. That Frank Sinatra Gold has 12 songs on it. Those are my favorite 12 Frank Sinatra songs. And I got to looking, and 2 of the ones off that album are in his top 10 songs of all time. So I don't know why it was called Frank Sinatra Gold when it didn't have any of his famous songs on it, but it was. I didn't know. It's the only Frank I had. Yeah. So
maybe that's why it wasn't called Platinum.
Right, yeah. Or it said in parentheses, fools. It was a fool's gold.
Yeah, right.
I like that.
So what, if you're just kind of thinking, again, I won't hold your feet to the fire, but what's kind of your favorite Frank Sinatra song? What do you think of when you think of Frank Sinatra?
Well, you just sang one of them, Fly Me to the Moon. And I also think of I Did It My Way.
Fly Me to the Moon is probably my biggest, but I'm a big fan of I've Got the World on a String.
Oh, yeah.
I've got the world on a string.
Oh, what about the one?
Sitting on a rainbow.
What about the New York one? Stars spread.
You gotta love that, right? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right,
Okay,
that's the one.
yeah,
that's the
huge.
one. Yes,
That's
I
massive.
forgot about it.
These are
That's
great.
the one.
Again, I think he's got a lot of really good songs. My favorite song by his is one called Same Old Saturday Night, which I really got to dig in. It's not in his top 50 songs of all time. But guess what? It was track number 10 on Frank Sinatra Gold. It's my favorite Frank song. And and no one's heard it, because why would you listen to a less popular song by some old dead guy? But I think it's really great. And so then I remember whenever I heard like the song My Way for the first time, which isn't on Frank Sinatra Gold, I was like, well, this is pretty good too. And that began to open my eyes to, oh, wow, this Gold is not the collection of his best 12 songs. So
They couldn't
My
get
Way
the rights.
isn't on there. Start Spreading the News is not on there. New York, New York.
Does he sing Mac the Knife?
No, that was Bobby Darin.
Mac the Knife is Bobby Darin? Okay.
Does that sound right?
I don't know.
I'm going to just quick look that up.
I love that. Do you know that song, Wopsle, Mac the Knife?
I don't know Mac the Knife. No.
Oh, you gotta go get it.
What?
But and so kind of the one last funny thing about his music that I'll mention is that on New York, New York is not on Frank Sinatra Gold, but there's another song about a city on this album, and it's called Chicago. And for me, when I think about Frank Sinatra singing about a city, I think about Chicago. That's the song, and like that's his city that he loves to sing about. Which is not true. It's New York, New York. Like we just had, the Times Square New Year's Eve where they play his New York, New York. And so it's kind of funny how I love Frank. I rate him so high, and yet like my perception of him is so messed up from how I got my start.
That's great.
I think yours is better. Yeah.
Well, I think you should listen to all of Frank. If you don't love him, at least get this Frank Sinatra Gold. I'm sure it's on Spotify because it's got my favorite 12 songs on it. And I don't want to delve into too much because his personal life, at the very least, was a mess, right? And, he at least was unlucky in love, but he probably kind of cheated on some people and, some spouses, which is, I don't know, that's really pretty grimy. It's alleged that he was in organized crime, but there's no we don't have a lot of hard evidence. It's said that he would have rather been a mob boss than the president of the United States. Like he kind of idolized the mob and thought it was cool. So he had just plenty of personal problems that a lot of them are pretty well documented. But I do think that I'm tired of apologizing for liking music that was made by dirtbags. If it's a good song, I want to jam out to it if it's a banger. Now, I don't necessarily want to support them, go to their concert. There are places that I draw the line, but especially someone like that's old and gone. If it's a banger, I'm going to jam to it. And was he a bad human? I don't know, maybe, but Chicago's a great tune. So that's what I say about people.
The iconic city, Chicago. Hey, let me ask real quick. What is Frank Sinatra a genre of music? I mean, what's the genre that he's in? And did he help to create it, or what's up with the whole?
Would you say that he's jazz?
I don't know.
I mean, we think about jazz as the instrumental, different. It's kind of different now, but I think it was jazz.
Maybe kind of big band.
Yeah, from the big band era of jazz, he was kind of the next incarnation of it. That's the way I think of him. Good question.
I usually call it just What Women Want music because that whole soundtrack had a bunch of great Frank songs and songs from that era. So.
And that's why Michael Bublé is so popular now because he's doing that same thing.
Here's an interesting thing. Google says that Frank Sinatra, the genres that he fits under are traditional pop, easy listening, jazz, swing music, and vocal jazz. I didn't know it was a vocal jazz.
Is that
I
like
think that's
scatting?
something like this. Skiddly beep boop bop. Yeah.
Zibba-da-bo-bow, ba-da-da-da-da-bow-bow. Yes.
People always talk about every time the chairman broke out into scatting, like everyone loved it, you know?
I think we should scat in every episode.
I'm leaving the skilly bop-a-doo.
Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about Frank, and maybe I've tried to downplay a little bit of his personal woes, has your rating of Frank changed? Old Blue Eyes still the same in your book, or do you feel?
You know
feel
what?
differently?
Yeah, I decided that you're right, and I don't really care at this point about his personal life at this point in my listening. So I think he's got to get, if we're just rating on the music, he's got to get an A+.
Very interesting.
Nice.
And I'm right there with you. When you just think about the iconic songs in the history of America, like literally, like in the history of this country, New York is, it's quite possibly like in the top 5 all-time songs that identify us. And so I love Frank. I love everything I love every song. I've never heard a Frank song that I was like, I don't ever want to hear that again. So, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to bump him up to an A+.
Yeah, I feel good about him too. And if for some reason someone's hearing this that doesn't know much Frank, I feel like he's worth your listen. If nothing else, Frank Sinatra Gold. Go find that same old Saturday night and listen to Wopsle's favorite song at least. But I think since there was 12 tracks on that album, I'm going to give him a 12 out of 12.
Perfect.
Oh, awesome. Okay, well, everybody, we'll catch you next time for reviews you didn't know you needed. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you guys.
Love you. Bye.
Love you.
Love
Bye.
you.
Love you so much. Bye. Oh my God.
I love you so much. Oh my God. Okay.
Fly me to the moon.
Let me into the Jupiter and Mars.
Love you guys.
I gotta pee.
Okay, stop it on that note.
All right.
Bye bye.
See ya.